Well, first of all, since Dr. Tiller's death, there's been a great increase in the amount of violence and rhetoric and hate in front of the clinics. It's been very, very frightening for many providers. I'm part of the Abortion Care Network, and we email each other, have a talk network that we're always talking about what's going on in other places. And there are providers who have, right after Dr. Tiller's death, where protesters would come up to them as they're coming in to go to work and say, how do you want it? Do you want a knife or do you want a bullet? Other clinics where they're outside now with, I think I already mentioned this, with a poster with a crosshairs in it with an abortion provider's face in it and saying, who's next or you're next or whatever it might be. And they're being very emboldened by what happened with Dr. Tiller's death and the lack of outcry about it. At my clinic in our little town, there's been in fact, 2 days after Dr. Tiller was murdered, there was 2 new billboards that went up that said, "Life, what a beautiful choice." And it, just appalling. And now they've gotten, we think it's 10, it might be 12 new placards that are 5 foot high that they mount on the sidewalk down a row, down one of the main streets or the main drives through town of all the aborted fetuses and the gruesome parts. So they started, the first time they put it up was the 4th of July. So women and, our families coming into town for the parade, for the events, for whatever was going on in town, drive through the main street and there's this disgusting material that they're forced to look at. And the kids, and of course, people asking questions of what's all this. So there's been a great increase in the amount of all of that happening at the clinics. There's also been an increase in the number of pro-choice people coming out of the woodwork and speaking, and that's been really wonderful to have more people writing letters, more people letters to the editor, and just speaking up and being willing to talk about their own experiences, and that's been very helpful as well. We're all just holding our breath, waiting, wondering what's going to happen next. I'm very afraid for Dr. Carhart and for Dr. Hearn in particular, for some of the physicians that do the later term abortions. It boggles my mind that, again, these physicians, all of us, put our life on the line all the time, and now even more are feeling that pressure.
It's a really sobering and unacceptable fact that the day after Dr. Tiller was killed, the anti-abortion fascists were at the clinics, like she's describing, some of them with big trucks with Dr. Tiller's face, saying heaven or hell, where'd he go, and posing the question of who's next, all of this. They were out there the next day, and there were not people defending the clinics out there. Look, there's the Christian fascist movement and what they're doing, and they are not just wingnuts from below, but they're very much been,
positions of power.
In positions of power and given a lot of impetus by the power structure, given a lot of legitimacy, treated as, look, it's outrageous. Randall Terry, who is he's a thug and a theocrat and a bigot, and he was given, every major mainstream New York Times and everybody else ran his interviews. He's a head of Operation Rescue for years. He's harassed and targeted doctors and women, and they put him in there in every interview all over the country saying, oh, well, we wonder if, we feel really bad about the murder, but he was a killer. And they let that run like that's legitimate. So all this on the one hand, but it's been conciliated to by the pro-choice movement that has been completely subordinated to the Democratic Party for the last 15 years or longer. And it's very crippling, and it's very damaging. I just want to say this. I want to take one example because it sets the context. Look, there are things we have to do right now on the ground that have to change about the safety of the doctors, but there's a whole framework that has to change. And for instance, in South Dakota, we were talking about this earlier, they had this, a couple of years ago, people may remember, they passed a ban on abortion that was in all cases, even the life of the mother, rape or incest, any of this. And if you watched, and it was worth doing, and it was a little bit infuriating, or a lot infuriating, if you watched the pro-choice so-called ads countering this, they had one after the other saying, well, women should really have the right to abortion if they're raped. But some women who need abortions are impregnated through incest. And some women who need abortions will die if they don't get them. And all of those things are true. but you're just setting yourself up for what's come next. Okay, that bill got repealed, and the next thing they want to do is pass a ban on abortion except in cases of life of the mother, rape, and incest. And what have you done? You've accepted the framework that there's something wrong with abortion, and it's a whole dynamic that's been at play where yesterday's outrage is today's compromised position and tomorrow's limit of what we can even imagine being possible. And we actually have to get off that trajectory, and there's no way to get off of it except to get off of it and come out and say, abortion is a fundamental right, there's nothing wrong with it, women are human beings, and take that Dark Ages shit back in the Dark Ages. That's not how we want to live.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier today, too. When we went to Dr. Tiller's funeral, it is an outrage. The organizations that are tied and subordinated to the Democratic Party, they did not send, the leaders of these movements, these organizations, were not even at Tiller's funeral. They weren't even there. This is not going to come from anywhere but people who want this right, who are not going to capitulate and cow down to the realpolitik of now we have a Democrat in office, let's be more subdued and cooperative, but who are going to get out there and upset the political atmosphere and bring something into the terrain that's missing, which is that women are human beings. This is a fundamental right. There should be no apologies on it. And we're not relying on the state or the politicians to do this. Scott Roeder, the man who killed Dr. Tiller, was caught twice in the week leading up to the assassination, meddling with and damaging the property of another abortion clinic in Kansas.
He was violating the FACE law.
He was violating the Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances laws. It's a federal law. It's a federal violation. The clinic owners called in his name, his license plate, his description 2 times to the FBI, and they did nothing. They did nothing. This is why Dr. Tiller was killed. If they enforce, that's not what the state is there to do. The FBI has never been a friend of the people in this country or around the planet. It is not a friend to women. And it's really going to be on us, and it's going to be on a whole new generation. And